first time out for a lot of you. We've met a few people earlier in the week and it's their first time in the city for a year, so it's wonderful that people are getting out and about again. Okay, Leonard and I began working together in 1982, linking our individual interests, me a photographer, Leonard a researcher historian. So we travelled around Australia many times and photographed and interviewed people in their homes, places of work, and copied their family documents. We have gathered one of the largest archives of Greek Australians. We even went to Greece to interview a number of returnee Greek Australians, published in our first book, Images of Home, Mavri Xenikia. We present both books and exhibitions, and that's a way of getting more diverse material in our collection. Our biggest exhibition was In Their Own Image Greek Australians, which was a partnership with the State Library of New South Wales. It toured throughout Australian cities and even featured in Thessaloniki in 1997 as part of Thessaloniki's cultural capital of Europe. And again, the exhibition travelled back to Greece in 2000 as Australia's contribution to the Cultural Olympiad. The talk tonight focuses on stories and valuable historical images we have sourced primarily from private collections. The question we most get asked is why we have been doing this project for so long. Firstly, we are not employed to do this work. We have other jobs to support this, and that, I think, is one reason for its longevity. The main reason Leonard and I became obsessed about this work was that as children of migrants, our stories, that is, stories that spoke about what our parents experienced and what we ourselves experienced growing up in a new country, were rarely recorded and never celebrated. Sadly, this continues to be the case. I want to finish with a statement that Professor Merri-bek wrote about our project, which also explains what the lecture is about tonight. The Greek Australians in Their Own Image project attempts to rewrite Australian history so that it includes Greek Australians from the beginning of European settlement. Certainly the work has located Greeks in every Australian symbolic and practical endeavour, from being convicts to participating in the gold rushes, to being innovative in the bush. The image of the Greek in the fish shop is a false one. The project's evidence points to a much richer exchange in all walks of life, including that of Greek Australians in Greece itself. So, enjoy the lecture, which Leonard will continue with, and we will have questions at the end.
Now, it's hard to believe that we started doing this work in our 20s, we're now in our early 60s. So yes, there is a passion here. And somehow I have to try and condense over 200 years of a Greek presence within Australia. So buckle up because it's going to be very swift. But bear in mind, this is a history. It is inclusive of various themes that we're interested in, but it doesn't contain all of the themes that we're interested in. So to begin with, I'd like you to say hello to a very good friend of ours, passed away in 1991. This is Bill Florence, Vasily Florias, and he was born in Plaklitia, Ithaca. This is 1922, Princess Pier, here in Melbourne. He's being welcomed to Australia. Or is he? Notice, what is he surrounded by? Certainly, there's the outline of Australia, but he's still at sea. He is the eternal migrant. He is in Australia, but he is not of Australia. And this story, ladies and gentlemen, which I'm going to unfold for you, is how Greeks became settlers out of initially being viewed simply as migrants, and how they became part of what you may refer to as the mainstream. But to a large extent, they've been hidden. And the reason why they've been hidden is because our major collecting institutions primarily have material from English-speaking background. Okay? So if you're going to do research on groups from non-English speaking background, you really still have to go out there and do the work yourself. Go out and interview people. We have colleagues at Macquarie University who still declare to us, "Oh, you're the WOG historians. Oh, you only look at one particular group. I just sit back and say, really? Well, so do you. They're called British Australians. Do you speak a language other than English? Have you researched anything in a language other than English? Oh, no, I haven't. Well, look at the mirror, because you are also looking at a particular group. We still have to write a history which is all-inclusive. Indigenous Australians and all who have come from various backgrounds into this great nation of ours. But having said that, let's go on. All of you are familiar, I would say, with Hugh Gilchrist's research. Okay? The 7 pirates who came out to Australia in 1829. Now, this was one of them, Andonis Manolis, and this is another, Gicas Vulgaris. These two remained within Australia. And for a number of years, since at least the late 1980s, they were considered to be the earliest confirmed Greek settlers within Australia. Now, bear in mind, we will never possibly know who was the first Greek to set foot on Australian soil, or who was the first Greek to actually settle. History likes hiding things. What it leaves us are that information that slips through the cracks, and we have to interpret that information. So, all of you may be aware that quite recently, one individual, or I would argue 2 individuals, have been revealed in terms of an earlier Greek presence, in terms of confirmation of an earlier Greek presence. But again, I would hesitate to say that these are the first Greeks. These are the earliest confirmed. Now, the gentleman that we're talking about, the research was undertaken by 2 individuals, James Prineus in Sydney, Peter Prineus in Sydney, and Costa Marcos here in Melbourne. And they have revealed through their research the name of George Emmanuel, or George Manuel. Now, there are a couple of problems here. If you go to the original sources, you'll find a variety of dates or suggested dates. In one particular article, it suggested when he died in 1878 at the age of 101, that he had been in Australia for 76 years. In succeeding articles, you read, well, he was here for 67 years. And if you take a look at those sailors, which is what he was originally, disembarking in Sydney, the year is 1823. So, when did George Emmanuel actually arrive? It's a little confusing. We have to do more research work on this. However, I would like to say that I would consider at the moment that the year 1811 is more likely, and that it is more likely that in actual fact there are 2 George Emmanuels that we are looking at. I don't have time to go into the details why. I just would like to indicate that in some information he is recorded as having been convicted of a variety of crimes. In other information, he simply is a farmer with an orchard at Castle Hill in Sydney. Now, at the age of 99, he got married. Wait a long time, didn't he? Wonder why. The person who he married had been previously married to another gentleman in Castle Hill, and she was 70 years of age. And if you read here, there's also a tongue-in-cheek suggestion that, well, they were married for 2 years, wonderful bliss, but unfortunately death took him, but guess what she gained? Property, on top of the other property of the previous husband. So she did pretty well out of this. So at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, just keep that name, George Emmanuel or George Manuel, in your head. But I would suggest that there's actually 2 of them, not 1. We've still got to do further research. Now, George Emmanuel is not the only name to come up in various records of the colonies. Here is another gentleman, and I don't know if you can read this. This is the death certificate for George Pappas. Is that a Greek name? Does it sound Greek? It sounds Greek to me. Now, interestingly, when Effy and myself first came across this name, we noticed this here. Where is it? Damn, it's not there, is it? Man of colour. Thank you, Effy. That's my brain's trust. Man of colour. What is a man of colour? Any suggestions?
Not Lily White.
Sorry?
Not Lily White.
Yes, correct. A man of colour at this part of the century is often referred to as a person, for instance, from the Caribbean, but within Australian context, referred to those whose parents, or rather whose one parent, either the mother or the father, may have been an Indigenous Australian. And for a number of years, that's what we considered the possibility to be. And we also considered that he was born in 1814 in Sydney. In actual fact, that's incorrect. We now find that George Pappas was a sailor who came out here in 1849, and he died of syphilis and scurvy 2 days after disembarking in August 1849. But because of his dark complexion, he was buried with a number of Indigenous Australians in Newtown, and he had been for over 70 years considered to have been an Indigenous Australian or part Indigenous Australian. But now we know that that's not correct, that in actual fact he was Greek. And bear in mind that Britain occupied the Ionian Islands and was a protectorate of the Ionian Islands from 1815 through to 1864. And so it wasn't uncommon for Greeks to be on both their merchant ships and on their men of war, okay? And there are others. In terms of convicts, Joseph Simmons was a Greek, but he was a Greek Jew. And he was sent out here and arrived in 1832. Unfortunately, though, even though he was given a ticket of leave soon after, he lost his mind and he